Good evening, everyone. I am Kriti and this is my colleague Akanksha joining you today for the talk. We are here to debunk some myths about child sexual abuse and discuss the complex dynamics of child sexual abuse today. This session is being presented to you by the National Legal Services Authority as part of their Amrit Mahotsav campaign. SAMVAD has been doing a series of these public talks in collaboration with the Karnataka State Legal Services Authority. Previously, in the last weeks, we have done a few sessions on child sex trafficking. We have been doing SAMVAD is a national initiative which works and a national resource to integrate services on child protection, mental health, and psychosocial care across the country. We welcome you to this session, and let us first start by we'll lay down a few concepts for you to understand better what child sexual abuse is, and towards the end of this session, we will have a discussion with all our participants. The reason why we have chosen this subject today is because there is so much over the last many years and last few years. There has been a lot of discussion about child sexual abuse. There have been numerous campaigns, discussions about sexuality, and definitely the awareness has gone up. But still, when it comes to abuse and sexuality, especially when it concerns adolescents, children, there's a lot of taboo, there's a lot of stigma, there's a culture of silence, there's no culture of conversation, and there are many myths that surround this issue. So we are together going to debunk some of these myths today. One of the biggest obstacles that we face when it comes to the prevention of sexual abuse is the little understanding, how little we understand this complex subject. As COVID-19 is the current pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, which has plagued us for a very long time, is child sexual abuse. And let me just hand over today's session to first Akanksha, and let's start by understanding some of the basic concepts about child sexual abuse.
Thank you, Kriti. So before we go on to debunking certain myths and perceptions that people have about child sexual abuse, let us first conceptualize it. What is child sexual abuse? As you can see, it is an interaction between a child and an adult where the child is used for sexual stimulation or gratification. In this situation, children do not fully comprehend or understand this sexual relationship or contact that they have with the adult, and therefore cannot consent to the act as a self-determining participant, because children, if you look at it from a development perspective, are not developed enough to understand what is happening, as well as not being physiologically developed as well. Exploration of sexuality between a minor, traditionally understood as below 18 years of age, could be exploitative if there is a considerable age difference between the two children. This goes to explain that the relationship, our law states that any person below the age of 18 is considered to be a child. So exploration of sexuality between a minor, which is anybody who is below the age of 18, is exploitative, especially if it can be considered abuse, especially if there is a considerable age difference between two children or the adult and the child. Yet again, child sexual abuse cannot and is not restricted to rape or penetrative genital contact. It does not always involve the contact of genitals or any body part with a genital. Digital handling of the child's genitalia, which essentially digital handling essentially refers to sexual abuse wherein no penile vaginal contact is made, but the child's genitals are assaulted by the perpetrator by using hands and other such objects. There is also non-genital forms of sexual touching under the POCSO Act, which says that you do not necessarily have to touch the genitals of the child in order for it to be called sexual abuse. Touching other parts of the body of the child for sexual gratification, which can include the breasts or any other part of the body, is still considered sexual abuse. Non-contact forms of abuse for the pleasure of the perpetrator is also child sexual abuse, such as exposing the child to pornography or taking nude pictures of the child, which essentially goes to show that sexual abuse can occur without any physical touch or contact of the perpetrator with the child. This is a basic framework of what child sexual abuse essentially is, what it means, and what it entails. The POCSO Act also provides for different forms of or different dimensions to child sexual abuse. It is no longer, like we saw above, restricted to one kind or a particular kind of sexual contact. So if we go to see, if we look at non-contact versus contact sexual abuse, non-contact abuse entails offensive sexual remarks or exposing the child to nudity or the perpetrator's private parts, or if they observe the victim in a state of undress or in activities that provide the offender with sexual gratification of any kind, or by exposing the child to pornography. This involves not directly touching physiological contact with the child. Contact abuse entails touching of the intimate parts of the body of the child, including the perpetrator fondling or masturbating the victim, and or getting the child to fondle or masturbate themselves. Yet again, if we look at contact abuse, it is not limited to just penovaginal interaction of any sort. Non-genital versus genital abuse. Non-genital contact abuse entails touching and fondling of parts of the body that are not the genital. This genital contact abuse then entails touching or fondling of the child's genitals. This itself can be penetrative or non-penetrative. If we look at penetrative versus non-penetrative abuse, using the penis or any other object to penetrate or orifice of the to penetrate any orifice of the child's body, including vaginal, anal, or oral penetration, versus other forms of contact abuse that may not be penetrative, for example, fondling of body parts. If you look at perpetrators of abuse, there are known versus unknown perpetrators. Abuse perpetrated by a family member or a caregiver or some person who's known to the child versus a stranger. If the person is responsible for care and protection of the child, such as, and this is a provision in the law, that within known people, if a person is responsible for taking care of the child or protection of the child, such as a staff of a childcare institution, a parent, a teacher, it qualifies as aggravated assault or aggravated abuse, which results in severe punishment under the POCSO Act, because this person abused the child in a situation or relationship wherein they are meant to be caring or protecting of the child. The use of a child for any sexual act, whether it is contact or non-contact, penetrative or non-penetrative, constitutes sexual abuse. All kinds of sexual abuse have a psychological impact on the child. The dimensions, as we saw them, such as the type of abuse or the number of episodes of abuse that happen with the child, who the perpetrator is, the relationship of the child with the perpetrator, these are all factors that are often used to determine the impact that these experiences of abuse have had on a child. It is very important for us, therefore, to remember that not every child would respond to abuse the same way. Each child is unique. The circumstances under which abuse happens is unique. And we may see different combinations of all of these dimensions that we've just discussed in different children for different cases.
Contrary to what always many times is believed, that sexual abuse or the sexual activity is a one-off act, it is important to understand that sometimes it's a very complex process. This process called grooming, and in which the perpetrator builds a relationship with the child, builds trust and friendship with the child, hears the child. It is very important. So one of the biggest myths around sexual abuse is that it is always coercive and violent. It is not necessary that the abuse is always violent or coercive. The methods of perpetration, it's very important to understand how these perpetrators actually target and approach children, and the way the child has been approached by the perpetrator and who the perpetrator is also determines what kind of impact psychologically would it have on the child, the abuse would have on the child. So it's very, the processes may vary in younger children and older children. And we are going to discuss these processes now to understand, because the more we understand these processes, it is easier for us to identify abuse in younger children, because younger children love excitement, gains. So they are at that kind of developmental stage where they love rewards, appreciation. So often inducement and lure is one of the methods that the perpetrators use with younger children. So they may use these techniques where they may be a friend of the family. They may just meet the child somewhere and they may just build friendship, and they may attract the child by telling you, I'll give you a chocolate, I'll give you a gift, don't tell this to your mother, it's all right. And this is how, they attract the child, and the child gets drawn to the perpetrator. They may even, because at younger ages, children are lesser inhibited. They do not understand sexuality. Cognitively, they do not understand these. They're not aware of the social taboos, the taboos around sexuality. They're more likely to run around without their clothes. They don't care. There's no shame. So the perpetrators use exactly these developmental milestones, and which is something which is normally a developmental trajectory for the child, can be a risk also for the child then. So this is something that the child, they may engage, because young children also, as we know, engage in a lot of sensory play. You may also find them playing with their genital parts, touching their bodies. They enjoy sensory stimulation. So they may enjoy tickling of the perpetrator, fondling by the perpetrator. They may enjoy some of these things, and they may not necessarily understand that this is abuse. So offenders often exchange the attention and affection for these sexual activities, and they may also because children naturally want to have friends, and they want this attention. They would say, if the child may have some sense of discomfort if the child is being coerced or is being asked to do something against their will. But they may use tactics like, if you do not do this, I will not speak to you, or I will not be your friend anymore, I will not play with you. So this creates a lot of confusion in the child's mind about sex, love, and care. They may understand that, it is only natural. This is only a natural way of exchanging affection with somebody who is a friend to them, or a family member to them. So this may create a lot of confusion in the child's mind. Children love excitement. They love secret games. They love everything which is exciting, especially younger children. So the perpetrators may also tell them things like, this is our special game. Do not tell anybody about it. Remember, nobody should know about it. It is between you and me. So all that special attention that children get, it again creates a lot of confusion in the child's mind about sexual norms. They may normalize these activities entirely. So if you see a young child engaging in these behaviors, wanting to, imitating similar behaviors within their peer groups, or talking about things which they are not generally at that age supposed to know, please be alert and understand that this could be a sign that they've learned it from somewhere. Either it has happened to them, or they've seen this happen somewhere. So we see that, these are some of the methods that the perpetrator may use. Then coming back to, of course, the more obvious ways are coercion and threatening the child to do something that they do not wish to do. So telling the child, because the child, there is a very little culture where we discuss with our children, ask about their days, about their friends, about what activities do they generally do. So telling the child that, they've started this activity or a game, sexual activities with them, they've started abusing the child. And when the child resists, they say that, if you don't do as I tell you, I will do something to your parents. I will do something to you. I will harm you. I will kill you. I will tell this to your parents and you will be punished. And children, younger children especially, they're scared of punishments. They're scared of these threats. So creating fear in the child's mind and forcing them to comply with these abusive ways is one of the tactics that the abuser perpetrator may use with younger children. This processes may slightly differ in older children. Unlike younger children, by this age, the adolescents and the children in the middle age groups, they understand the social taboos. They have some sense of, what is appropriate and not appropriate. They understand what is desirable, what kind of things can be told in a public space, what can be shared and not shared. Because there's already so much, very little education about sexuality. There's very little discussion about some of these issues, and they're just shoved and shrouded in silence. So what happens is that the child, an adolescent, is being abused. They would prefer to not say these things. Again, adolescents, given their, if we look at it from a developmental lens, adolescents in us are in a stage where they're concerned more about body image, where they're trying to understand who they are, their identity, where they're looking for autonomy in their relationships. They're trying to assert themselves. So this becomes a risk for the adolescent age groups, because the perpetrators use exactly these things and to manipulate children. So, for example, the perpetrator may say how beautiful you are and shower them with, special privileges. Tell them that I will ensure that, you're so lovely, you're so nice, and I will ensure that, you don't get any punishments, you can do this. And they like that, somebody so uninhibited is with them, somebody who's available to them all the time, who agrees to their ways of thinking. So again, this becomes a problem. You're beautiful. I love you. No one in the world cares about you the way I do. Mostly manipulation with adolescent girls. So again, confusions in the mind of adolescents about what sex, what love, what getting care and giving care is. This becomes even more difficult in cases where the adolescents do not have secure attachments, where they do not have stable families, where they do not have people and groups to count on, and the social support systems are not great. We will see more about these grooming process as we move forward. Again, threat and coercion. So conditioning the child with the adolescent with sexual activities, negative emotions and memories through violence and coercive acts, creating pressure on the child to, keep things a secret. So the children, the adolescents in that case, if the threat, and it can be a very traumatic experience for adolescents, if coercion and threat has been used by the perpetrator, you will see that they will later in their lives, or adolescents in general would avoid relationships. They will develop a tendency to avoid sexual, they would also feel guilty for sensations of sexual arousal. They will feel aversion to sex, intimacy. They will develop negative associations with intimacy. The fear that the perpetrators create in their mind also lead them to comply with some of these unreasonable demands in the abusive ways that the perpetrator is imposing on them. So it is very important again to understand. So transmission of all the misconceptions about sexual behaviors. There is so little information out there, and the only source of information, and the adolescents count on these peer groups and the internet. So the perpetrator may approach an adolescent and say things like, when I was your age, I'd slept with so many people. The more people you sleep with and the greater sexual experience you have, it would be better. No man wants a girl who is ignorant about sex and who does not understand this. They're in the process where they cannot, the brain is not fully, adolescent brain is not fully developed to make social judgments, to make decisions adequately. They're more emotional at this stage. They're more prone to influence like this. They are trying to understand sexuality. So they may also say things like sexual experience is very important. A real man, should have tried everything at least once. And what kind of person are you if you've not done it yet? Why are you being so scared and afraid of everything? not had any sexual experience, that is not cool. What will other people think? All other people your age are having sex with they have sexual relationships, they're not being so scared. So again, using and utilizing, manipulating some of these things that adolescents are, the developmental stages that they're going through, confusions about sexual norms, again, that, adolescents would, making them believe that it is all normal, it is all natural, it is all okay, and creating confusions about, and influencing their decision making. And clearly they're not in the stage where they are fully equipped or have the right information to make their decisions. So manipulating them in this way. Blaming the victim, once this process has been going on for a while, if they resist or if they express their, no, that they do not wish to continue this, the perpetrator may also accuse the adolescent of having given the consent to these activities, saying that, you were the one, but I was there, and, you were a mutual party to this. So offender starts blaming the victim, and adolescent, not knowing fully, or it is so nuanced and so complex, these methods of grooming, and the way these relationships starts, that the adolescent may actually end up blaming themselves, and they may think that, the onus was on me, and I did not stop the abuse when it started, and it is my fault somehow. So all the shame about, the feeling that I'm dirty, the shame about sexual abuse, what if somebody gets to know, and, so victim is stereotyped as damaged goods. They feel that we are damaged. The self-esteem goes lower. They engage because of, they may also, because sex is something which is a need of every human being. And if the abuse has continued for a very long time, you may also observe sexualized behaviors in adolescents, which means that, sometimes when we say that this child is very, so we would also like to bring to your notice that, using terms like this adolescent is hypersexual, they may have asked for it, or they may have, enticed the other person. These are all, we request you and urge you to not use these terms, because it is an impact of the abuse or the grooming process that has taken place over a period of time. It's an indicator that the abuse has taken for a very long time. So all the high risk behaviors, which includes the engagement in sexual activities, or substance abuse, etc., you would see could be an impact of the sexual abuse that the person has experienced. So what we see here is that abuse is not always violent, and abuse can be in different forms. So grooming essentially is the way in which a perpetrator basically approaches the child, tries to establish a relationship with the child, manipulates the child through into sexual acts. First, by identifying the victim. So mostly the child who's more vulnerable, a child with less stable family, with no good communication with parents, who's a certain kind of personality, isolated, has some. So these are the children who are vulnerable and are mostly targeted by the abuser, because they ensure that there's no other way in which they can communicate with, or they can share this information with other people. Gaining the trust and access, so being available, playing games with the child, telling the child how special they are, giving them a lot of attention and affection, playing a very important role. So whenever I have a problem, this friend or the abuser or the perpetrator is always available. They understand what I'm going through, and they always have a response to give, unlike other people who are never available, or who do not understand and agree with my ways of being and my ways of thinking. So isolating the child again, so, creating secrecy about the relationships, telling the child that I love you the most, and, look at your mother, why would she not understand? I don't know why, this is not right for you. And you can tell me everything. People don't understand, and I agree. So then creating secrecy around all of these through personal contact, letter, imbuing the relationship with specialness and excitement. So, it is between us. We don't have to tell this to anybody. And isolating the child basically, and, developing a very, very special relationship with the child. Introducing all these misconceptions about sexual behavior, like we just saw, that, the more people you sleep with is better, and giving them all the advice about sexuality, and, engaging with them in these sexual behaviors, building intimacy. initiating the sexual contact. It may just start with simple fondling, simple touching, tickling, and then can go on to more complex and sexual contacts. So only after this trust has been built, and when they understand that they have access to the child, they have the trust of the child believes that they are not going to harm them, they initiate the sexual contact. They see how the child is responding to the initial contacts, and then they proceed. Controlling the relationship. So basically using their power, manipulation, emotional manipulation. If you tell somebody, I will get hurt and I will kill myself, I will do something, or I will harm you or your parents. So both ways it can work. So controlling the relationship by creating the power dynamics using age, or other ways at this stage. So we see how it is a very, very complex process, and contrary to what we believe, it is not always violent. It can be very, very, it may look like on the face of it that the person has also consented for these relationships. So as we move forward, we would also like to see, so some of, how do we see that, what are some of the signs of CSA? If a child has been sexually abused. So some of the physical signs include pregnancy in adolescents, which is a sure sign, genital injuries, urinary tract infections, if they have been frequent. The chances could be that because of the child's engagement or in the sexual activity, or the child has been engaged in sexual activities, these have occurred. So it's always a good idea to be alert and check if these have if you see some of these physical signs. In younger children, you may see sexualized behavior. So the child touching another child inappropriately, or saying certain words which you feel that are inappropriate for that age. Avoidance of specific adults. So this person, uncle, acts very funny and I don't want to be around. Or if they're coming, then the child behaves in a very odd way. So some of these are indicators that something has gone wrong, and you must then suspect abuse. Nightmares, and if the child has been having sleep disturbances, clingy behavior, not willing to leave you, and they mostly want somebody to be around, cannot be alone, refusing to go to school. If you see a regressive behavior, if you see that the child is bedwetting, the child has been toilet trained and has suddenly started bedwetting, has having nightmares, is fearful, anxious, always alert, and is avoiding people. The scholastic performance has gone down. The child is not able to concentrate. You see certain behavioral changes, emotional changes. You see the child is isolated. They look a little upset. There are unexplained body aches and pains. There's a sudden stomach ache. If checked medically, there's no reason for them to feel this way. So these are some of the signs that indicate that sexual abuse has taken place. In older children, you may see certain other signs like self-harm. Again, signs of depression, crying spells, feeling sad and low all the time, anger, fits of anger, which, suddenly the child is very irritable, fearfulness, anxiety, sleep disturbances, or flashbacks about what has happened with the abuser, perpetrator, suddenly waking up in the middle of night, being alert and scared all the time, avoidance of certain specific adults, school refusal again, and bad scholastic or medically unexplained pains, high risk sexual behavior. If this child has suddenly started using substances, or if you feel that the child has started engaging in sexual behaviors, has run away, if the child is in the institution or is in the family, maybe somebody has abused the child within the family and the child cannot take it anymore, you may also find runaway behaviors in that case. So I'm also going to present to you quickly what we call the index of suspicion in child sexual abuse. So you see a triangle, a pyramid here, and when to suspect. So we have already seen some of the signs, etc. At the peak of the pyramid or the triangle, you see the disclosure by the child. If the child has told you that sexual abuse has taken place, please remember that children have no personal motives. They do not lie about these things, especially younger children. We will talk more about some of these issues as we debunk the myths. But if the child themselves have provided a narrative to you and told that the abuse has taken place, please believe them. And disclosure by the child is the highest at this index of suspicion. It means that the abuse definitely has taken place because children are very unlikely to make these stories. Again, pregnancy, there's no question that sexual abuse hasn't happened, as we say that so if pregnancy has been detected, sexually transmitted diseases, genital injuries, if the abuse has been very violent or coercive, you may also see genital injuries. Remember that physical abuse, if the child it has been coercive, it can be very traumatic for the child. It has also been seen in studies that when the abuse has taken place, recovering from physically, when the sexual abuse is coercive, it is easier to recover psychologically. Although it is traumatic, psychologically, it is easier to recover and heal from that, versus when a known person has abused you and the abuse has the known person has abused you, and it was not coercive because of the sense of betrayal and the shame and the pain that it brings. Sexualized behavior, especially in younger children, if you see it, these are clear hints. At the lower order, you will see symptoms of depression. Depression could be because there is a learning disability, there are other issues, but always remember that one of the factors one of the reasons for depression or sudden behavior and emotional changes could be that the child has been sexually abused by somebody. So never rule out that possibility. If you see that suddenly there is some problem in school, if you see there is aggressive behavior, sudden onset of bedwetting, aches, pain, general ill health, please inquire about abuse. Please talk to your children and discuss, because these the point that sexual abuse could be one of the factors for these cannot be ruled out. So as we proceed now, we would like to also engage with all of you, and I would request Akanksha to take this forward.
Now that we've set up an understanding of child sexual abuse, we've looked at it as a concept, we've looked at different aspects pertaining to child sexual abuse, let us come to the very important part, which is the debunking of certain myths or certain perceptions that people hold about child sexual abuse. For this activity, I would like to request all of you to please engage with us on YouTube chat. We can see your responses. How this is going to go ahead is that we will be projecting a statement to you on the screen. You are to read the statement. We will, of course, read it out for you. And you have to let us know on the chat box whether or not you agree with this statement, whether you agree or you disagree with this statement. And then we will build on it and have our discussion. So I am going to begin now. The first statement before us is that children believe that they are responsible for what happened. By what happened, we mean the sexual abuse. Therefore, they feel guilty and they blame themselves. This is the first statement. I am going to wait for a minute for all the participants to kindly engage with us. So I request all of you, I invite all of you to please tell us your opinion about whether or not you agree with the fact that children believe that they are responsible for the sexual abuse that happens to them. Therefore, they feel guilty and they blame themselves. This is the statement, and we would like to know if you agree with it or you disagree with it. Okay. So, all right. We're getting some responses. Okay, we are having some responses where participants are saying that they agree that children do believe that they're responsible. Thank you very much for all of your responses. And this is true for older children, but not younger ones. This has a lot to do with age. It pertains to age, because for children to feel guilty and to blame themselves, like Kriti was also talking about, the impact of the way children are abused if they're older or they're younger. They need to have enough of a social understanding of taboos, stigma, things that, people feel guilty for or bad about. In a case where adolescents have been exploited and manipulated and groomed, like Riti has said, they feel that they have given consent, even though that consent has been entirely manipulated by the perpetrator, as we have discussed at length earlier, that a child is incapable of giving consent because they do not have the understanding to give an informed consent, and yet they are manipulated into believing that they have, and therefore feel guilty and blame themselves. So absolutely, yes, you all are right. We will now move on to the next statement, which is children can easily identify and report sexual abuse. Children are able to identify and report sexual abuse when it happens to them, is the next statement. We will wait for a minute and invite all of you once again to please participate and tell us whether or not you agree with these statements, with this statement in particular. Okay. All right. We will just wait for another minute. We're getting some responses. Yes. So children, if children are not told about what abuse is or not educated about what abuse is, they are confused. And because they are confused, like Kriti also mentioned, they may feel uncomfortable. They may think that this is wrong or this feels wrong, but they do not know what is happening to them because they do not have the knowledge about it. And they don't know, sometimes they're groomed into believing that this is something that is normal and this is something that happens. And like Kriti said, they're lured or they're coerced into different forms of subjugating themselves to the perpetrator. Younger children, while adolescents may be able to identify abuse and report sexual abuse more easily than younger children, it is again important to understand that abuse exists in not just coercive and violent ways, but sexual abuse can also happen through manipulation and grooming. And in this case, even adolescents who would ideally have the capacity to identify and report sexual abuse may not report it or identify it because they would not consider it or perceive it as abuse and would consider it to be something other than that, which is, say, love. The next statement is children do not report sexual abuse because they fear that no one will believe them. How many of you, you, my friends, believe that children do not report sexual abuse because they fear that no one will believe them? We will wait for another for a while. Okay, we're getting responses, which is saying yes, they agree. There are some participants who are disagreeing. Okay. All right. Okay. Children do not report sexual abuse because they fear that no one will believe them is true to a great extent, because we see that the whole concept of sexuality, gender, sexual relationships is something that is not very easily spoken about at a family level or in schools or any other place where the child is exposed to, because of the underlying stigma, the underlying taboo surrounding sexual relationships and sexual abuse. A lot of times, parents or caregivers or any adult who the child can who confides in often deny them. Often they refuse to believe that the child is saying the truth because of many reasons, one of which is also that there are complicated family relationships. It is important to understand this, and Kriti has said it, and I would like to reiterate that children do not lie about sexual abuse. Children do not have the same kind of motives to lie about something like adults do. They also don't lie about sexual issues because most often than not, they do not have the knowledge or understanding of what that is. There was a Supreme Court judgment that said that girls are in fact more likely to lie about abuse not having happened than abuse having happened. They will more easily deny that abuse happened instead of admit that abuse happened, because there is so much stigma, there's so much fear pertaining to whether or not someone will believe them or what happens. Lastly, I would like to say that with respect to boys, there are a whole other gamut of gender and sexuality related stereotypes to boys engaging in sex and sexual behaviors. There is a fear of how they are perceived, they are laughed at, and therefore chances of not reporting are very high. Children, the next statement to which you have to agree or disagree is that children have the verbal ability and the language to describe their abuse. Children will be able to very easily speak about their abuse, narrate their abuse, or have the language to describe their abuse. We will wait for a minute for participants to respond to us. We request you to please give your responses to us on the chat box about what you think about children having the capacity or the verbal ability to describe their abuse and the language to describe their abuse. Okay. All right. There are some participants who are agreeing to the statement. There are some participants who are saying that no, they cannot. Children, especially younger children, do not have the verbal ability or the language to describe their abuse, because when we look at it from a developmental perspective also, the child may not have the verbal ability or the words to describe their abuse. Add to that, we have the whole stigma and the taboo and the hush-hush culture around body parts or sex or sexuality, which leads to children not being able to report even if they want to. An example of this is in a case, a child kept saying that there was a snake that went inside her. And she kept referring to it as a snake, which she essentially meant was the penis, but she did not have the words or the language to describe that body part or to know what happened. Similarly, with older children, a serious lack of sexuality education, a lack of understanding or knowledge of body parts, right from the childhood, right from when children start going to school, they are not given this information. Therefore, it is very important, especially when we look at it from a reporting perspective, that we need to give children the language to explain these experiences that they may have. They need to have information and knowledge about their bodies and about sex and sexuality. Children can have consensual, loving sexual relationships with adults. The next statement that we urge you to respond to is that children can have consensual, loving sexual relationships with adults. We will just wait for a minute. Okay. Yes. So under POCSO, under the Act, there is, it states that any sexual contact, as we have seen in the beginning, any sexual contact between an adult and a child is definitely has an exploitative element to it, no matter what. If you look at it developmentally, I'm just reiterating what we've already discussed, that developmentally younger children are not ready physiologically, or they do not have the ability to understand entirely the concept of sexual relationships. So they cannot essentially give an informed consent to this activity. With older children, I would just try to reiterate that because of the grooming processes, they may have the knowledge of it, but they may be manipulated.
So remember the concept of manufactured consent, where the child does not necessarily know that what can be the consequences. So while engaging, was the child aware about HIV, the sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy? Was the child told that the perpetrator would marry the child in cases of adolescent romantic relationships? So moving forward, our next statement is children are scared of their abuser's threat and therefore do not report abuse. Because children are scared of the perpetrators, they do not report abuse. So we request you to please respond on the chat and Like we have already seen in our grooming processes and the processes that the perpetrators use, that of course coercion and threat is one of the ways in which abusers engage children or impose sexual activities or sexual ways on children. So of course it is, we all agree and we have seen that it is correct. uh, Sexual abuse of children, our next statement, only occurs in low income families, in deprived communities where there are alcohol issues, where there is unemployment. It is not a problem that occurs in good families. It is a problem that occurs in low income or deprived communities. So this was an age old myth, and we would like to debunk it again, and reiterate again that sexual abuse can happen to anyone, irrespective of which community they come from, what is their gender, what is their class, what is their background. So we never know what is happening behind closed doors within a family, and or in a community, or it is not a problem of poor people or of the communities with low income, as we all agree. Um, some forms of sexual contact between an adult and a child are non-coercive and do not involve penetrative intercourse. Not all kinds of abuse are penetrative in nature. Such forms of abuse are not psychologically disturbing for the child. Our next statement, if it is not penetrative, it would not have the same psychological impact, or it would not disturb the child. So we request you to please respond to this statement. Some form of sexual, it is not always coercive, and if it is not coercive, it is not sexually disturbing, psychologically disturbing for the child. So friends, as we have seen the dimensions and the nature of CSA, we have seen that, the impact that abuse would have on a person. We have seen, we agree that not all kinds of sexual activities or sexual acts are physical or contact. Sexual abuse is not always contact abuse. We also understand that the impact depends on the severity, the process used, the significance that the perpetrator had in the child's life. So sometimes, even when the abuse has not been penetrative, there can be exposure to pornography. There can be the child can be exposed to numerous other things, and there can be fondling of other parts of the body. These all entail abuse, sexual abuse. It necessarily is not violent always, and it can be equally damaging, and it can have like equal impacts. So how a child will deal with abuse and what child will make of it depends on their personality, their resilience levels, and what they understand about these, or what kind of support system they have. So our next statement is, child sexual abuse is always perpetrated by strangers and persons unknown to the child. It is always by strangers and not by known people. So I would request you to please place your responses in the chat box. The statistics state it is a fact that 75% of the abuse that takes place is by known people, and lesser abuse takes place by unknown people. So these are people who are, as we have seen in the grooming processes, who have built friendship. It's not always a one-off act. Who have built friendship, who have access to children, who have gained their trust. So these can be people, the bus drivers, the family members, the teachers, the tutors, the play, people who are in the play areas, the guards, the other people, etc., who are a part of the child's routine, who meet children regularly, who have access to them. So it is a very age-old notion that it is only a problem of strangers, that only strangers perpetrate abuse on children. Our next statement, again, friends, perpetrators of child sexual abuse are likely to have mental illness, which is what causes them to abuse children. Perpetrators have some mental illness, and that is why they abuse children. So we would request you to kindly tell us what are your, do you agree or disagree with the given statement? So there is no typical psychological profile of an abuser. It is always important to understand that any known, unknown person can perpetrate abuse. These are ordinary looking people, ordinary people with ordinary lives who are part of children's routines, who have access to children, and they do not necessarily have a mental illness. So it is important to understand that it would not be right to generalize this. It is always important to be alert and be on a lookout. So it is important. So again, we disagree with the statement that perpetrators of sexual abuse are likely to have mental illness. These are ordinary people. There's no typical kind of abuser. Anybody could be an abuser and anybody can be abused. We also now, women, which is again, gendered notion. So women are never perpetrators of child sexual abuse. What do you think about this, friends? Women never sexually abuse children or adolescents. It's always men. So for the longest time in a gendered society like ours, we have believed, but with POCSO, it is quite clear, and the law has made it quite clear that the abuser can be anybody. It has got nothing to do with the person's gender. It could be a male, it could be a female. So the study by the Ministry of Women and Child Development also shows this. And we would like to place an example in front of you of the recent Muzaffarpur case, where the case of institutionalized abuse of children, where children were being sexually abused and trafficked. Out of the 21 accused people, 11 were women who were abetting and aiding, sexual abuse and trafficking rackets. So it's important to also always break the stereotype and always and understand now that it is an orthodox gendered notion that women are never the perpetrators, and it can both be men and women. Both girls and boys can be abused, and both men and women can be abusers. However, statistically, more men tend to abuse than women, or more cases are reported of men abusing children or adolescents or women, which is moving on. Affectionate young children initiate sexual contact with adults. Affectionate young children initiate sexual contact. So if you remember how when we were discussing about grooming, we also talked about how at what stage in younger children, older children, at the developmental trajectories itself it becomes a risk factor, and it becomes an opportunity for the abuser to get access to the child or manipulate the child. So children tend to, with younger children, sensory play is something that they engage in and they enjoy. They enjoy rewards affection. So children, it is important to understand that this is not for sensory play for children is not sexual. They do not understand. They're physically and mentally, cognitively not ready to engage in sexual activities. The intention behind sensory play, it is a normal developmental milestone for them, and which is manipulated by the perpetrators. So there is no excuse, absolutely no excuse. The onus can never be put on the child. The child in no way initiates the sexual contact. We have also seen the matters of consent, issue of consent, and with adolescents, how abusers manipulate children, adolescents into believing that it is their problem, or believing that they have consented to a sexual activity. So again, go back to the grooming processes and understand that they're vulnerable. Younger children and the adolescents in their own ways are vulnerable. They're going through a phase of change, and they cannot initiate contact. They do not have the information to consent to these activities, or sometimes not have the information to engage in these activities. So very important to note that. Older children have a responsibility to resist sexual contact when initiated by an adult. It is the responsibility of the person who's being abused, or the older child should have stopped abuse when it was initiated by the adult. It is So any comments on that? We invite your responses and we can read your responses. Please continue to share your responses with us. So friends, I would like to also bring to your attention sometimes, I would like to give you the situation where there is this 30-year-old woman at work one day, and somebody comes and says, your body looks really nice in the dress today. And the person is thinking about, they're working, and they think about, and they call their friend to ask that, somebody said this to me, do you think they crossed a boundary? Sometimes even adults cannot make sense of these sexual acts, sexual active comments, and they find it very confusing. So when children and older adults, older children are manipulated by perpetrators, all that affection is showered, all the gifts are showered, and they're told how special they are and how lovely they are and how delightful it is to be with them. Putting the onus, I would like to again say that, it is so hard for us as adults also to sometimes identify, was there a violation of boundary? It is so hard for us to report these matters. So putting that onus on the child to, stop abuse is incorrect. And we absolutely disagree with this. It's a myth that, it's a problem. And POCSO clearly places the onus of proving that on the perpetrator that they have not abused the child, and there is no onus on the child who has made the disclosure or who has reported abuse to explain that, they were abused or not. We would like to move forward, and the next statement is adolescent girls who wear revealing clothes are asking for sexual contact with adults. So girls who wear tank tops, girls who wear revealing clothes, they are asking for it, and they are the ones responsible. They have started and asked for the adult to initiate the section. They have basically invited. So what are your thoughts on this? We would request your responses. So the chances of the dress of a person playing the role in whether or not they would be abused or they would be targeted are, minimal, and it does not count. There are instances of a 6-month-old baby being abused. There are women in saris, there are women in burqas. There is a student in school uniform. There is a 4-year-old wearing a frock. There is a 12-year-old wearing a tank top. There is someone else. So I would like to bring your attention to this point that, clothes, in cases of abuse and for perpetrators, clothes do not matter. It's the access to the child, it's the vulnerability of the child, it's the availability, it's the kind of relationship. So it's all about grooming, and the clothes have no role to play in this. Always remember that the 6-year-old child, what is this child wearing to entice or, to invite an abuser to initiate sexual contact with them, or a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a woman in kurta? And then what exactly are, children supposed to wear? In fact, when we ask children to cover up and wear, full clothes, or not experiment with their clothing or wear certain clothes, when we put all these barriers and restrictions, we reinforce shame, and we reinforce the fact that, it is them and not the perpetrator. So again, very important that clothes have no role to play in this. Our next statement: boys enjoy sexual contact with adults more than girls and are therefore less likely to perceive abuse as a traumatic experience. Boys enjoy sexual contact more than girls. We request you to please share your responses, and we can read that a lot of you are writing whether you agree or disagree. So again, as we have been talking about, a lot of these notions are very, very gendered, and it has got to do with our understanding of sex and sexuality. It is absolutely untrue. Child sexual abuse or abuse of any kind is a violation of boundary. It is traumatic. It is a bad experience for anyone, irrespective of their gender. It is a matter of violation of space of a person. It occurs without consent. It cannot. So it is not. It involves a lot of grooming and manipulation, feelings of shame, confusion, betrayal. So it's a gendered notion, and it comes from the fact, a very patriarchal and the thoughts about the gendered notions that men enjoy sex more than women, and men always want to have sex, and women do not enjoy sexual activities, or women do not understand sexual pleasure. In fact, it is equally traumatic. It can be, like Akanksha mentioned, that again, the gendered stereotypes that they have to be masculine, they will be ridiculed, they will be laughed at if they report abuse, child sexual abuse. So the chances of this experience being more traumatic it is more likely that for boys this experience can be more traumatic, because it is also associated with negative masculinity and how they have to live up to the societal expectations of being a boy. So therefore, boys are less likely to report abuse. Moving forward, some adolescents may have engaged in sexual and romantic relationships prior to their abuse experience. Such adolescents have the capacity to consent to sexual relationships with adults. Adolescents may have, before their abuse experience, engaged with someone else. They may have been in a relationship, and they may have engaged a consent in a relationship with some other person. So they do have the capacity to consent to sexual relationships with adult. So somebody says not good to compare both. Okay, this is the comment to the last statement. Somebody says maybe. Okay. So the POCSO Act very clearly says that, no child, there can be no defamation of the character of a person, even if a person has a child, adolescent has previously engaged in some kind of sexual activity. If they've reported abuse, on no basis can anyone say that, this child understands what sexual experience is, and therefore they have the capacity to give the consent. POCSO Act clearly says that, this cannot happen. So I would give you an example. If a married woman is assaulted, or if a married woman is sexually abused, would we say the same thing to them, that, because you were married, you've already have had sexual experiences, and therefore it does not count if you are being sexually abused. It was consensual because you understand, and when it was initiated, you did not stop it. So you gave your consent. So it is important to understand that it in no ways equates to their capacity to give consent. If abuse has been reported, it is abuse, and you can, in no way the child's character can be defamed, or the child can be told that because you have done this, this is it was consensual, or you have also agreed to it. The next statement, children who do not report sexual abuse want the contact to continue, sexual contact to continue. If they have not reported it, they want it to continue. So we already know that there are so many barriers to disclosure. We know that how sometimes children can be threatened and coerced, how there is a very little culture of conversation. There's so much shame and stigma attached. Children have a sense of, what is appropriate and inappropriate, what is desirable and not desirable in society. So if they're not reporting, it is more likely, the likelihood of the barriers to disclosures are the societal norms and the problems that exist in the society, and that there is no space. It may in fact be, the fact is that children sometimes are waiting for the opportunity to tell you that something wrong has happened, because it is making them uncomfortable, because they're thinking about it. So it is important that we create that space for our children to talk to us about abuse experiences, that we do not wait for that one conversation, that we continuously create a space that where we are talking to our children about regular issues, where we're talking about their day, their peer groups, etc., so that they don't feel so that we are approachable to them, so that they don't feel so much, they're not held back when they have to talk about some of these difficult issues with them. They look at you as somebody they can talk to and ask for advice, somebody who will listen to them. And therefore, it is very important to create that space for children. Our next statement: a victim of sexual abuse always avoids the abuser. So we request you to please share your responses. A victim of sexual abuse always avoids the abuser. So we see that a lot of you disagree, and correct. We also disagree with the statement. It's a myth that, you know, children will always, or the victim would always avoid sexual abuse, the abuser or the perpetrator. The perpetrator could be threatening them to be in contact. It is also true that, you know, we talked about sexualized behaviors, which is one of the impacts of child sexual abuse. If it has happened over the period, in older children, you will see sexualized behavior. So we again request you to not use the terms like this child is a nymphomaniac or hypersexual, etc. It is normal for older children to desire sexual engagement. And when sexual abuse happens and it has been it has been normalized, it has been done over a period of time regularly, it is a body's need, and you see sexualized behavior. So sexualization is again an impact of abuse, and it is a clear hint that sexual abuse has happened, especially if the abuse has taken place in non-coercive ways. You would see sexualized behavior in older children. So it is not necessary that they would always avoid the abuser. In fact, in some cases, when the grooming process has been done very, very nicely, you would see that sometimes the victim would also defend the abuser, saying that they have not done it or they love the abuser, because that is how the confusion and the feelings have been created in the child's mind. So if it is non-coercive, the chances of the child not avoiding the abuser and wanting to go back to the abuser and showing sexualized behavior is very, very high. Again, a child who shows no signs of distress has not been abused. So if the child is not crying, they're not upset, they're not depressed, they're not distressed, and sexual abuse has not happened. So we see that there are people who are disagreeing to the statement, and we would like to again quote from, we would like to share this case of Gurmeet Singh versus the state of Punjab, where the 16-year-old girl, while she was on her way to school, was kidnapped by 3 accused and was raped and was forced to have alcohol. And the girl returned back. It was during her exams. She went back to write her exam the next day after this traumatic experience. And later, when the abuse was reported, there were questions about why was the abuse not reported any sooner, and how could they wait, and etc. And the court responded in favor of the victim, and in the judgment quoted that this in no way, it does not matter when the abuse was reported, and it is in fact important that it has been reported. It depends on the child's temperament, the kind of the resilience levels of the child, the personality of the child. So some children remember the dimensions, remember the processes, remember that each child is unique, and you may see a combination of different things in each child. Emotionally and behaviorally, they may respond to abuse in different ways. So it is not necessary that each child would show the same signs and symptoms, and sometimes they may just isolate themselves and be totally indifferent as well. So again, every response would be different. Coming back to our last statement, a physical examination by the doctor will almost always show whether or not child has been sexually abused. So a physical examination always shows that the child has been sexually abused. So we have had a long discussion about this, and it's a myth because we have seen that engagement of child in sexual acts could be in many ways. A child could be exposed to pornography, could be photographed, could be asked to see nude pictures, or the perpetrator, masturbation, or the non-contact kind of abuse, fondling of the child's parts other than the genitalia. So we know that it can happen in many, many ways, and which cannot be determined by physical examination. So therefore, talk to your children about sexuality. If you see that there are signs and symptoms, and if you see that the child has suddenly changed, so it is important to understand that, it is not necessary that there would always, and remember that they may not always have these injuries, etc. So sexual abuse is not just limited to penetrative assault, and we must always inquire with our children, talk to children, and understand from them what has happened. So these were some of the myths that we have discussed, and we have also now we come towards the end of the sessions, and we would like to talk to you about a very important concern that many people raise, that when to believe the child. Or when to not believe a child. When do we know that the child is not lying to us about, abuse? So we would again like to bring back your attention to the fact that the first thing, why children lie, and what kind of lies do children say. So, for example, children are more likely to touch, young children especially are more scared about being punished. They fear punishment. They are they're more, they understand what is socially desirable, what is likable. They understand what is not appropriate and what is what is not what can give cause punishment. So children are more likely to lie about not having done their homework, or somebody physically assaulting them, or bullying experiences, or lying about their older children about who they have a crush on, about their sexual and romantic interests, etc. These are the nature of lies that children would usually have, and children are less likely, like adults. The motives of the motives are absolutely different. If a child reports abuse, like we have discussed it at length, and we quoted from the Supreme Court judgment as well, that given the shame, the stigma, and social taboos, older children, it is very less likely, if they are telling that they have been abused, it is very, very less likely that they're lying about it, because of the social consequences, because the kind of shame, the labeling, etc., that would happen. Because they would not want, or especially if the abuse has happened with boys, the fear of being ridiculed or being looked at in a different way, etc. So they're very less likely to abuse. Similarly, with younger children, if you look at it from a developmental perspective, they are not cognitively, equipped, or they do not understand the concept of sexuality, etc., shame, etc. So if they report abuse, and if they are telling you, kindly, please believe them, because there are no reasons for them to lie like adults. So we want to present to you the simple framework where I would present to you these 4 situations where in the first situation, child has reported abuse. The child comes to you and tells you that the abuse has happened, and you believe the child. In this situation, so when the child's narrative was true, child has reported to you, you have believed the child, you start your inquiry, you provide your support to the child, and it was true. The second situation, where the child comes to you, reports abuse, tells you that sexual abuse has happened, somebody has made them uncomfortable, etc. You disbelieve the child, and you disbelieve the child, and it was false. You don't believe, and the information was false. The child reports abuse, and you find out that you believe the child, and you find out that the report was true. It had happened, but it was false, but you believe the child. And in the end, the child reports, but you do not believe the child. and the information was also false. So in a situation where the child has told you and you instantly believe the child and you provide support, it is the ideal situation. In case where the child has reported abuse and you do not, it was false information and you do not agree, you just got lucky because, it could have happened. You never know until and unless you inquire. In case where the child reported abuse and you believe the child, but the information was false, for some reason, if the child had lied, there's no harm because you believe the child and the possibility that it could have happened has been averted. Or the another situation where the child had reported abuse and it had happened, but you disbelieved the child. So the child was actually saying the truth, but you did not believe the child. It is the scariest situation because the child's request or the child's disclosure has been unheard, and the child would continue to be in the state of distress and would continue to be under distress and be and abused by the perpetrator. So it is always to always remember that please believe the child. Here are some of our, as a closing thought, some of the guidelines or some of the thoughts that we would like to share with you. Children rarely make up stories about sexual abuse. It's a major step in healing. Whenever they share about sexual abuse, please do not say that it is their fault. Always keep your hearts and ears open and listen to them and provide them assurances. Remain calm. Do not get worried and do not get too angry. Do not try to be sensitive. And if you are worried, children can sense your discomfort and they will understand that something major has happened. So try to keep your calm and composure and make children feel okay and normal, that, it is not a big deal and can be dealt with. Affirm the child's feeling. If they are telling you that they have, please take them seriously. Tell them that, thank you for telling us, and tell them that it is indeed a very bad experience, and you feel it is, and that you are there for them. Tell them what will happen next. Do not keep the child hanging. Please tell them that what is the process, and please keep them informed about what would happen, because it can create a lot of anxiety in the child. So make them an equal participant in the process, understand what they would like to do. Support the child, and please report abuse because it is mandatory. And with this, these were some of the, and we have talked about a lot of things, and these are some of the resources that we would like to share with you. Our website has all our resources and our manuals, and which you can use. Please follow our social media channels as well. And friends, it is a very, very important subject that we have touched. This is part of our public series. We have already discussed sex trafficking in some of the previous talks with on YouTube. And in the coming days, tomorrow, we would also have a session on CSA in Hindi. And in the same week, we are going to talk about adoption and also pathways to vulnerability, how children get into, how children become vulnerable, difficult circumstances. So please watch our YouTube public talks. And now for the before closing, we would request you to place any questions if you have, or if you would like to share any comments with us, and our team would respond to your questions and comments. Thank you very much for your patience. Your questions or queries or comments or any thoughts that you have on the YouTube chat, and our team is here and we would respond to your comments. Okay, we see that there are no more questions. Thank you very much for being very, very patient and all your responses. And with this, we would like to close today's session. Tomorrow, we will be back with the same session in Hindi. Please do join and circulate the information in your networks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.